Well, this is a talent attraction video, part of this three-part series. Why are we doing talent attraction? How many of you are looking for people to go to work for you? We are losing 15 people a day to retirement, 100 people a week, 400 a month. That's 5,000 a year. Over a decade, that's about 25% of our workforce. So we need to bring young people here. You'll be hearing we're building housing for young people as well. But this is a series. You'll be able to access it on our site in a few weeks and use it for your own talent attraction to Sonoma County. So let's get the program started. My name is Ben Stone, Director of the Economic Development Board. There are nearly 600 people here today. We've never had so many people. Sorry, it's a little crowded. Thank you for accommodating some of the seating adjustments we've had to make. Today we'll hear from the Sonoma County Community Foundation's Beth Brown, then from the new board chair, David Rabbit, and finally from the UCLA Anderson Forecast, Director and Senior Economist, Jerry Nicholsburg. I'd like to take a moment now to thank our presenting sponsors that have helped support our economic development initiatives and events like these. You can see them on the placards on your tables. Thank you to our foundation and presenting sponsors, Luther Burbank Savings, the City of Santa Rosa, Exchange Bank, Kaiser Permanente, PG&E, Pure Luxury, Redwood Credit Union, Sonoma Raceway, and Tri-Counties Bank. And our premier sponsors, Bank of Marin, the Employment Training Panel, ETP, Friedman Goldberg, Sonoma County Tourism, Sonoma County Clean Power, and St. Joseph's. Please join me in a warm round of applause for our sponsors. I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to the many city, state, and federal officials and their staff members with us today. Please stand or wave as I call your name so that we can acknowledge and thank you for your dedication to public service. And for the audience, please hold your applause until we get through the entire list. So let's start with our Board of Supervisors. From the 1st District, Susan Gorin. And from the 2nd District, David Rabbit. 3rd District, Shirley Zane. Thank you for waving, Shirley, as standing. Good. 4th District, Jenny Chamberlain is here for Supervisor Gore. And from the 5th District, Amy Windsor is here for Supervisor Hopkins, who's newly with child. On the federal level, we have representing Congressman Thompson, Stephen Gale, and we have our congressman here, I understand, Jared Huffman. At least there he is. Thank you, Jared. Thanks very much. On the state level, we have representing Bill Dodd, Logan Pitts, and representing Assembly Member Jim Wood, Will Tesconi. From the cities, we have for the town of Windsor, the Bruce Okrepke. For the council member from the Sonoma is Logan Harvey. For the mayor of the city of Santa Rosa, Tom Schwedhelm. Also council members Julie Combs and Ernesto Oliveras. From the mayor of Rohnert Park is here, Gina Belforte. The vice mayor of Rohnert Park is here, Joe Callanan, along with council members Jake McKenzie, Pam Stafford, and Susan Hollingsworth-Adams. We have the mayor of Petaluma here, Teresa Barrett, and the mayor of Healdsburg, David Higley, along with council members Evelyn Mitchell and Joe Now Jokas. From Cloverdale, we have council member Melanie Bagby, as well as council member Marla Cruz. From Sebastopol, we have Nasa Hinton, the mayor. The county clerk recorder is here, Dava Proto, along with the superintendent of schools, Steve Harrington. The trustees of the school Office of Schools is Herman Hernandez and Gina Kuklas. And while she's not an elected official, we're very pleased to welcome the president of Sonoma State University, Judy Sakaki, as well. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. Continuing in the spirit of recognizing others, I'd like to give you some quick highlights from our local educational institutions and our 9 cities to recognize some of the amazing work they've accomplished over the last year. Thank you to their staff for writing the summaries here and the photos. Sonoma State University graduated its largest class ever, approximately 2,700 students, and also launched a new strategic plan focused on serving our region and becoming a national model for student excellence. SSU is also building in a new university district in Rohnert Park a total of 1,500 new housing units. Well, that's the way to go. Sonoma State is also holding a North Bay Economic Outlook and Housing Summit on February 19th. In May 2018, Santa Rosa Junior College awarded 2,400 associate's degrees to about 1,800 graduates, making the graduating class of 18 the largest in the college's 100-year history. About 2,700 certificates were also awarded during that time, providing students with the skills they need to fill critical positions here. Empire College, with the input of employers who partner with Empire College and on advisory boards, Empire recently launched 19 redesigned programs addressing the training needs of the local workforce in this period of historically low unemployment. Programs range from short-term certificates to help workers get certifications, including one in cutting-edge Department of Defense certifications to help companies defend and protect against cybersecurity threats. So that's a whole new career path opening up around cybersecurity. To address the ongoing teacher shortage, the Sonoma County Office of Education this year opened and dedicated a new state-of-the-art teacher learning program. This building houses a teacher intern program as well as numerous teacher and administrator programs. In addition, SCO is pursuing a project to collaborate with the housing agency to build below-market housing on land owned by SCO for teachers in Southeast Santa Rosa. Way to go, SCO. That's great. In addition to our educational institutions, we're excited to provide some highlights of the 9 cities over the past year. I'll also be reporting on the number of houses each city is permitted or authorized, so you'll begin to see what's going on around the county in terms of cities building houses. The city of Cloverdale partnered with the Cloverdale Chamber of Commerce on a marketing campaign, Experience Cloverdale. It's the nucleus of a self-titled Instagram page and website that is also featured on sites such as TripAdvisor as a tourist tool. The marketing concept includes fun taglines, such as Experience Cloverdale, where you can dance under the stars on Friday Night Live. And if you stop here, you'll want to stay. So in terms of housing numbers, they have 6 new one-bedroom apartments and 5 accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. Cotati, after a joint public meeting in 2018, a proposed hotel project will be going through formal public review and construction in 2019. Also, the city and Farmster, in partnership, are establishing a long-term operation as a demonstration ranch for the public. The Cotati numbers for housing are 29 single-family residential units, 8 new ADUs, and 121 new units by the Cotati train station. The city of Hillsburg is employing a more thoughtful community development approach to help provide affordable housing. The Hotel Trio owners and the city worked together to build a 37-unit apartment complex solely funded by the hotel owner for middle-income households. The city hopes this approach can be replicated to build projects that reflect a good balance of residential and community development. So Hillsburg's numbers for housing, 52 new units, and 12 of them are accessory dwelling units. Petaluma, the new digester at Petaluma wastewater treatment plant, is the first phase of a project to support food and beverage manufacturers by allowing the plant to accept organic waste and turn it into fuel and reduce greenhouse gases by 3,000 tons of CO2 per year. Petaluma's housing numbers, 100 new building permits issued and 339 units entitled. Rohnert Park, they're working on building a new downtown, and Rohnert Park is going to have a really cool downtown. The photo is the developer's rendering of the future downtown Rohnert Park, Station Avenue. For housing in 2018, Rohnert Park approved or permitted over 1,200 homes and apartments. Santa Rosa, the state of Santa Rosa is housing, housing, housing. By the end of 2018, Santa Rosa reached the halfway point on the 2-year rebuild goal, with just over 50% of the homes lost, both rebuilt and occupied, under construction or pending construction permits. In addition, Santa Rosa is looking toward the future with the Up Downtown initiative. This award-winning program incentivizes housing growth and downtown development through changes made to processes and fees. In terms of housing numbers, Santa Rosa has built and bidded 2,400 new units in Santa Rosa. As I look at Santa Rosa, 2,400, 1,200 in Rohnert Park, just on this page, we're seeing a lot of housing come to the fore. Sebastopol has installed bicycle lanes and pedestrian crosswalk improvements. I just read what they give us here, so this picture is the new and improved pedestrian crossing on Bodega Bay at Bay Avenue. The city also continues to expand its image as a sustainable city. This year, the city adopted a zero waste policy, sponsored free in-town bus rides on the county's first all-electric bus, and businesses continue to focus on locally grown and made foods and products, farm-to-table dining, experiential retail, and local arts and craftspeople. Sonoma embraces art. Partnering with the Sonoma Valley Museum of Art, the city continued its successful temporary public art program in the plaza this summer, and in October it installed Laura Kimpton's Love sculpture as part of an exhibition commemorating the 2017 wildfires. The city also supported the pilot launch of Sonoma Art Walk, an evening where businesses partner with local creative artists, held on the first Thursday of every month. And in Sonoma, they built 180 multifamily and single-family units this year. Windsor is excited to highlight the new opening of the Russian River Brewing Company. How many of you been up to take a tour there? Anybody been up there? Wow, we should be holding this up there. Yes, so they've become a real draw for beer enthusiasts from around the world. Last year, their two-week event, Pliny the Younger, generated $3.5 million in new economic activity in Sonoma County. The Windsor location has 85,000 square feet of warehouse, production, offices, and hospitality, as well as adding over 100 new employees. How's that for economic development? Isn't that great? Really, Windsor. In Windsor's housing numbers, they've got a total of 93 new ones and also have permitted another 20. For the unincorporated county, the housing permitted numbers for both rebuild and non-rebuild is about 1,100. So lots of great things going on around the county, and I think a surprising number of housing units are being built, entitled, permitted. So lots of good news here. I'd like to give you a little update what the EDB's been up to this year. We've been busy implementing Strategic Sonoma, the county's new 5-year economic development plan, which was approved by the Board of Supervisors in July. The plan would not have been possible without the support of its 30-member stakeholder group, as well as some 200 individuals that participated in focus groups. Critical to the success of the project was the leadership of Pam Channer and Brett Martinez that kept the project on track, kept it with a results orientation, and we're very pleased to see the actions that are coming already. Most of the initial Strategic Sonoma work focused on 3 priority areas: housing, workforce, and getting a manufacturing alliance going so we can keep our manufacturers here. For housing, we invited the Santa Rosa Chamber to launch an employers housing council. Chamber Director Peter Rumble reports that Housing Council has met several times and is 15 of the county's major employers are participating on that council. The council is also focused on encouraging housing development across the market spectrum in coordination with local governments, so much housing growth is countywide. Similar to other communities in California, the council is also considering establishing a housing trust to help provide additional financing for housing here. For workforce, in November, the EDB and the Workforce Board hosted a meeting with 3 local post-secondary institutions, Sonoma State, the JC, and Empire, and 8 employers representing a cross-section of industries. This meeting represents the first time that these 2 groups, employers and educators, have gotten together to talk strategically about intentionally strengthening our local talent pipeline and to keep local students working with local employers when they graduate from college. The group will continue to meet, pursue new initiatives, and help plan the future of work spring economic forecast, which will be held here on April 26th. Finally, Supervisor David Rabbitt and the EDB hosted a roundtable discussion with a number of local manufacturing executives to discuss their interest in establishing a manufacturing and tech alliance. To address the critical needs of this industry, the group agreed that it would be beneficial to continue to meet and plan new programs. Additionally, we've been pursuing a number of other projects, including working with the junior college to pursue a $10 million grant funding for a construction training center. We're very optimistic we'll get funded once the government shutdown is smoothed out. And this center would generate 750 construction workers a year. So over 5 years, we'd really have the construction workforce we need. How's that sound to you, Keith? Yeah. And on the light side, we're gearing up to launch the 10th annual Sonoma County Restaurant Week. This year, we're working with throwing bakeries in the mix with pastries called the Pastry Perks program. Typically, we have 150 restaurants from around the county participate. This is their off season, so this is a way to help generate some income for restaurants. So there's a lot of work being done around the community, and you will have the opportunity to hear from our speakers about these efforts. First up will be Elizabeth Brown, President of and CEO of the Community Foundation, who is working on building community resilience, both through the Foundation's philanthropy and through a new project, Map One Sonoma. I've got a question for you. How many businesses, nonprofits, educational institutions, and government agencies do we have in Sonoma County? I'll give you a hint, lots. And so wouldn't it be great if we could know who does what and where the intersections are amongst all those activities? Well, this new One Sonoma project does just that. It maps the various organizations, efforts, and systems that make Sonoma County tick. By understanding how they are interconnected, we can better identify where we can nudge the system to affect positive change towards creating a healthy, vibrant, and sustainable Sonoma County. Beth brings 25 years of experience in philanthropy in her role as president and CEO of the Community Foundation Sonoma County. Beth previously worked in leadership roles at the Marin Community Foundation and the Council on Foundations in Washington. And she's a recent winner. I see Brad is here. She's a recent winner of the North Bay Business Journal's Nonprofit Leadership Award. So please join me in welcoming Beth Brown. Beth? Thank you. Thanks very much.
Well, good morning, everyone. When I started in my position and moved to Sonoma County several years ago, about the time that old picture was taken, this event was one of the first ones that I attended, and it made a real impression on me. When my former colleagues in Marin and San Francisco would say, well, is it really different up there? I'd say, well, get this. They have this county treasurer called Ben Stone, and he can host a breakfast at 7 a.m., and hundreds of people will come. And when I say 7 a.m., I don't mean it as a suggestion to get people there by 8. It's actually 7 a.m. So I do believe Ben is a treasure for our community, and I've come to know him as a great colleague and friend. The love in the air is thicker than the smoke. We all remember this message that you can still see on a handful of storefronts around town. Love, in the many forms that the outpouring of the heart can express, was palpable. For Community Foundation Sonoma County, that outpouring of support came in the form of generous donations. Over 7,500 donors contributed close to $15 million to our Resilience Fund. And that was on top of the tens of millions of dollars given for immediate relief to the efforts led by the Redwood Credit Union in partnership with the Press Democrat, as well as by the San Francisco-based Tipping Point community. The Resilience Fund is focused on long-term recovery. To sharpen that focus, we have identified 3 key areas for impact: helping individuals with financial needs, healing community trauma, and housing solutions. We've started our investment in each of these areas by supporting key nonprofit partners. For example, Legal Aid of Sonoma County, to help them expand their legal services dedicated to providing support for people who lost their homes. So far, they've served over 150 clients, many needing help with insurance and FEMA. Legal Aid's advocacy has yielded over $2 million in funds for fire survivors. And because their work is funded through grants like ours, 100% of the funds that they receive from FEMA and insurance go straight to the fire survivors. We've also invested in the Sonoma Community Resilience Collaborative to bring in the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, a nationally recognized trauma program. Over the past 6 months, they've trained over 100 community members in a dynamic train-the-trainer program. The focus has been on teaching evidence-based self-care tools for effectively addressing stress after the fires. Then each of these trainers now will be working in their own communities to teach others these coping skills. And there's more trainings to come this summer. In the area of housing solutions, we've made a grant to Share Sonoma County, which is a home sharing service matching people who need housing into homes owned by seniors. It's a classic win-win situation, provided much needing housing and for seniors offering modest rental income, caretaking, and companionship. Share Fire specifically links community members who opened their homes in response to the crisis with fire survivors who lost theirs. What we're learning in this years-long process of rebuilding community resilience is that money, while essential, is not the only currency required for our community's recovery. We also need a wealth of collaboration, creativity, and courage. We need to come together with big, bold, and creative ideas, and we need to ask tough questions of ourselves. What can we all contribute in order to rebuild the structure of our neighborhoods and reweave the fabric of our communities? How do we use this as an opportunity to look at underlying inequities? We need to focus not just on the symptoms, but on the systems. We need to acknowledge the many factors that continue to make this a tale of two counties. For some, Sonoma is a county where people have the resources needed to survive and thrive, not just through a disaster, but through the everyday challenges that are the pillars of a good life: financial stability, work opportunities, access to healthcare, and much more. For other residents, including far too many children, Sonoma is a place sorely lacking in some of these basic pillars and opportunities. What if our long-term recovery from the wildfires could result in a bigger shared vision for a more unified approach to addressing these issues? A dynamic project built on this perspective is MAP One Sonoma. MAP stands for Mapping and Aligning People, Place, and Plans. It's a project to develop a unifying vision for Sonoma's recovery from the wildfires. The goal is to identify shared goals and integrate the many efforts already underway across the county by bringing together a broad diversity of perspectives and needs. The project is designed to be complementary to the recovery plans developed by the county and the city of Santa Rosa. It uses a proven process to integrate differing perspectives on the issues. The project was developed and is being managed by Scott Spann of Innate Strategies, who has applied his unique process in the public, nonprofit, and private sectors for large-scale change projects. He is working with a local design team that includes myself, Christy Pitchell, advisor to Tipping Point and the Hewlett Foundations, Dan Scaff from Beneficial Bank, Lisa Carino from the United Way, and Oscar Chavez from the county's Human Services Department. The project began last summer with interviews with 30 key leaders, then expanded to 8 small groups, with a large strategy meeting planned for later this spring. The project is mapping and linking leaders around a variety of issues, including housing, the environment, and equity. If you are involved in leading a recovery effort of any variety and you are not yet connected to our project, we would love to hear from you. You can reach out to the email on the screen, map@sonomacf.org. And Ben has been kind enough to give us an opportunity to come back at the EDB's April event and give you an update. So since this is the first day of February, soon to be Valentine's Day, I'd like to close with a reminder of the power of love. I believe that philanthropy at its core is a love story. It's about the love of community that compels us to give of our time, our talents, and our treasure. Thanks to each one of you for all you do to express your love of this place we call home. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. That's very inspiring. Now I'm pleased to introduce the Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, David Rabbit, to give some remarks on what's coming up. Yep. This past June, David Rabbit was elected to his 3rd term representing the 2nd District in Sonoma County. He was first elected to the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors in November 2010 after serving 4 years on the Petaluma City Council. Supervisor Rabbit was elected by his peers to serve as president of the Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG, and was twice appointed by Governor Brown to represent local governments on the California Seismic Safety Commission. Please join me in welcoming the new chairman of the Board of Supervisors, David Rabbit.
Doing good. Thank you, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I got to say, the congressman was making note that that picture might be a few years old. That's the benefit of serving for a little while. You get to use You get to use the older pictures. I think the gray hair is a dead giveaway, but thank you very much, Ben. Very much appreciate that. And thank you, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. And really, don't fear. I plan on being brief so that we can get to our esteemed guest, Dr. Jerry Nicholsberg, to provide the 2019 economic forecast. He's also going to give us this is great, he's going to give us the winning Powerball numbers this coming weekend. So we'll see how well you do forecast, Jerry. Thank you. And there's so many people here to recognize this morning, but I do need to take a moment to recognize two. Two of my heroes are here to see if I make it through the speech. My wife, Jane, and my son, Patrick. And Jane is moving in on 35 years in neuro-oncology at UCSF, and Patrick has just finished his first year as being one of our vital CAL FIRE firefighters. So thank you for being here this morning. So I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. As chair of the Board of Supervisors, representing my colleagues, really to stand before you and declare without hesitation that the state of our county is strong. And it's we always like strong counties. And really, our county is strong because of the tenacity and perseverance of its residents. Residents who are quite literally rising from the ashes to rebuild their homes and their communities. Residents such as Brad Sherwood of Larkfield, who I know is here this morning, Michael Holdner of Mark West Estates, Jeff Okrepke of Coffey Park, Will Abrams of Hidden Hills, Susan Maron of Kenwood, all serving as captains within their neighborhoods, points of contact, to tackle obstacles, to collectively overcome challenges, to ensure they and their neighbors can not only rebuild, but establish an even stronger community. It's residents like Vida Iskandar, who established a website entitled Neighbors Together, a clearinghouse of information for those in the rebuilding process. It's residents like Mike Beeler, a local contractor, who authored guidelines to assist those in rebuilding process to hire architects, engineers, and contractors, all at no cost. Our county is strong because of the businesses that supply more than simply jobs within our county, but become part of the fabric of the community. Businesses such as Medtronic, who partnered with Homes for Sonoma and provided land for temporary housing for fire survivors. Businesses such as Boulevard Barbers and the Petaluma Hair Company, offering free haircuts to Coast Guard members during the recent government shutdown. Businesses such as Keysight Technologies, who temporarily moved 1,200 employees to Rohnert Park in Petaluma to maintain operations within the county while their facility was brought back online. Businesses such as the Russian River Brewing Company, whose Sonoma Pride beer raised over $1.1 million to benefit fire relief. Our county is strong because of the many community organizations and nonprofits through which our residents generously donate their time, their money, and their expertise. Organizations like the Redwood Empire Food Bank, providing over 13 million pounds of food annually to those in need in our community. Organizations such as the Career Technical Education Foundation of Sonoma County, partnering with companies and organizations such as SMART, Keysight Technologies, County Fleet Services, LabCon, EJ Gallo, and Strauss Family Creamery to provide gap year internships through Sonoma Corps, growing our local workforce for the future. Organizations such as Burbank Housing, who recently purchased the Parkwood Apartments in Rincon Valley, ensuring residents affordable rents for the next 55 years. Organizations such as COTS in Petaluma, who just this week provided 24 residents a home of their own. And just this morning, you saw in the paper, organizations such as Kaiser Permanente, just yesterday, $1.6 million to Burbank Housing to build affordable housing complex in Santa Rosa, totaling an $8 million investment in their community for fire recovery. So if we've learned anything from the past 18 months, is that this county can overcome any obstacle. It is because of we can overcome any challenge, any impediment, because of the tenacity and the determination, the generosity, the compassion of its residents, of its businesses, and its community partners. When our county was faced with adversity and hardships and tough times, we didn't throw up our hands in defeat. We came together, neighbor helped neighbor, stranger helped stranger, and we began the hard work of rebuilding hand in hand. That is strength. That is why we say Sonoma strong. Because of the housing crisis, skip my page. I knew I was going to do that. But for as strong as Sonoma County is today, we cannot afford to become complacent. We cannot rest. There is always more work to be done, more challenges to tackle, and more improvements to be made. The wildfires have provided a new lens in which to shape our work, a new focus, a new way of doing business. The nature of government, let's face it, at all levels, is to be additive. New regulation is usually added on top of old regulation, which is usually from even previous legislation or regulation. That has been business as usual. And it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, many times it shouldn't be that way. Permit Sonoma has stepped up, slashing fees by a third or more, turning permits around in days, not weeks, expediting permits and projects. We are one of the only counties in the state of California to process accessory dwelling units applications over the counter. Because of the housing crisis, Permit Sonoma took the unprecedented step to ask residents to help identify vacant or underutilized land that could accommodate housing. That resulted in 60 submittals that could result in over 2,000 housing units. It's an unprecedented move, but when you are in the middle of a crisis, you take bold action. New affordable housing developments will soon be in Sonoma Valley and Windsor, on West College and Roseland Village in Santa Rosa. The county and the city of Santa Rosa are piloting new approaches to planning for housing through the recently created Renewal Enterprise District. The RED allows both the city and the county to access financing and funding through our state and federal partners. Again, when you are in the middle of a crisis, you take bold action. Housing growth will not and cannot sacrifice our quality of life, however. And to that end, our green belts and urban growth boundaries are secure, and our access to open space has increased. In the past 10 years, Sonoma County Regional Parkland has doubled in size. This past October, Tole Lake Regional Park became the newest, and at 3,400 acres, the largest regional park in our system. To ensure the ongoing quality of our regional and city parks, voters in November overwhelmingly passed Measure M, which will provide $11.5 million in annual funding. The Sonoma County Ag and Open Space District now protects over 117,000 acres, including 3,000 acres added this past year. The district's matching grant program pledged over $3.6 million for new park extensions, new improvements, and public access throughout the county. We also know that strong counties need strong infrastructure. And over 5 years ago, the Board of Supervisors made a commitment to rehabilitate our 1,380-mile county road network. Since that date, Sonoma County has increased road funding by a factor of 9 and resurfaced nearly 400 miles of roads. Last year alone, 27 roads totaling 100 miles were paved, and we're looking at a similar rate in the next cycle. To achieve this, Sonoma County spends more discretionary dollars on roads than any other county in the state of California. SB 1 will provide another $12 million to our county for roads, and we have dedicated one half of those dollars to pavement preservation, resurfacing, and the other half to maintenance. And neither investment will supplant existing funding, but only add to it. Our county road pavement index increased for the first time in decades, and we are finally starting to turn the corner on county roads. Our freeway widening project is fully funded, and we promise to be Marin County's biggest advocate for completing the Sonoma Marin Narrows. SMART recently welcomed its 1 millionth passenger. Its Larkspur extension, currently under construction, will open this fall, and the airport to Windsor segment is fully funded. In addition, just this week, a new grant of $12.6 million to construct nearly 5 miles of pathway was awarded. Our successful Sonoma County Airport now has 4 airline carriers. It's closing in on 1.5 million passengers a year, a number that will continue to grow as flights to Denver and Dallas come online later this year. On your tables this morning, you'll see some Alaska Airlines swag. Alaska Airlines is celebrating over a decade of service to Sonoma County, and we thank them for their partnership. Sonoma Water continues to address the challenge to use every drop of water efficiently and effectively, not only for today, but for future generations. In compliance with state law, and in order to improve reliability, we have successfully launched groundwater sustainability agencies in 3 basins within the county. And right this minute, we are in the process of saving ultimately billions of gallons of water in Lake Mendocino by utilizing enhanced weather forecasting tools to better manage our reservoirs. And thank you to our Congressman Huffman and Thompson for their help in that. We are also protecting our largest source of water, Lake Sonoma, through the deployment of a fire camera network. We also know strong counties rely on a robust public safety system. This year, the county purchased a new $5.5 million helicopter, a tool that has proven to be invaluable to law enforcement and in saving lives. The new helicopter replaced a 22-year-old model and whose age was requiring costly maintenance, and I think I can definitely relate to that. The county also doubled the staff within the Emergency Management Division. The division will now allow the county to prepare, respond, and recover from any disaster. Just this last Tuesday, the board discussed a new approach to providing fire protection services within Sonoma County, a generational change that could see the current 39 separate agencies consolidate to a handful or even perhaps one, all with the intention to provide superior service in the most efficient way possible to the residents of Sonoma County. So we are a strong county, and while we do not know what this year will bring, we do know that we need to continue to move forward. We need to continue to face those challenges head on, continue to work collaboratively, and we need to continue to take care of one another. We know we can't rest. We know there is more work to be done, more challenges to tackle, and more improvements to be made. But I think by doing so, we will always be and always remain Sonoma County strong. So thank you very much for being here this morning. And not only is today a special day, not just because we're going to get the Powerball numbers here shortly, but this is also the last State of the County event masterminded by our beloved Ben Stone. And Ben's going to be retiring in some months down the line after, 33 years of duty, Ben? And I want to please direct your attention to the video screen as we honor Ben this morning.
Hi, Ben. This is your friend Steve Herron.
I'm Jim Bielenberg and served on the Sonoma County Economic Development Board between 1994 and 2011.
Pam Chanter, current chair of the Economic Development Board.
I just want to say a few things as we honor you on your retirement.
We created the Sonoma County Economic Development Board Foundation, the first of its kind nonprofit for a government agency which has allowed sustainability in dollars that the organization has been able to raise to ensure continuity of the programs that the EDB puts forth. Kevin Veenstra receives a call out for that, our local attorney who was instrumental in putting that together.
Because of the research program and the economic programs that you hold in the spring and the fall, benefiting a lot of people today. So,
EDB carries on many of its programs over many years, and one of its best programs, most popular programs, is Restaurant Week, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. And we've added a new element this year, which I'm sure Ben loves, and that is pastry perks. Ben's always looking for the next best thing in economic development, and he was the first in the community to really focus on microbreweries and spirits. And he suggested that we put on a big conference. Of course, we started with a study, and that industry has grown tremendously since that point in time, which was a number of years ago. One of the most impactful initiatives that EDB has done, thanks to the work of both Ben and Al, and of course the staff, is creating a micro-lending program. We have partners, Working Solutions in San Francisco, and 11 local banks have participated in this program. And we've given out $1.5 million in microloans to startups and small businesses that want to expand. Many of them are Latino and women.
And another program was the Economic Vitality, which was the first economic strategic plan for Sonoma County brought forth.
More recently is Strategic Sonoma. Ben started this process by creating a 5-year economic plan. But little did we know that within a few months after we started that we'd have the fires. And at that point, luckily we had hired a national consultant in recovery, and they were able to help our task force to pivot quickly into recovery strategic Sonoma rather than just a 5-year plan. We were fortunate we had a lot of leaders on the task force, and we had support of the community, and within a few months we had taken that strategic Sonoma plan and completed it and had it approved by the Board of Supervisors. Since then, a number of the recovery groups here in Sonoma County have used it. It's an 80-page plan document, and it's even been used with other cities and counties throughout California.
Seeing the impact that you had on so many lives of young interns from some of the best colleges that went through a serious interview process to be chosen for the roles over the years, the lives that you've touched, giving these young people opportunities.
Other programs of note include Sonoma State's engineering degree program, Soft Tech, North Bay Technology Roundtable, Small Business Development Center, Bay Trade, its successor North Bay Export Assistance Center, and of course, the state of the county.
You know, I remember when I first joined up with the EDB and met you, you were one of those unsung heroes of Sonoma County.
Ben's accomplishments in the last 30 years have really been groundbreaking. He started from scratch, and it's a tribute to his effort and his passion and commitment to excellence to bring this forth. One thing that always stands out was Ben's furious note-taking with a new idea that just a concept would take up a full page on his notepad.
You know, Ben doesn't just sit around coming up with great ideas all the time. He also spends a lot of time on the phone with the Press Democrat. He has been quoted close to 700 times since 1994.
And sort of our friendship and our business relationship sort of built over time, and just all the great things. I remember when you moved into the office off of Steel Lane and over to College Street, and we went through that, and you had a very micro staff that's expanded gradually over time with all of the projects that you've taken on.
Well, on a personal note, Ben, I'm going to miss your intelligence, the deep conversations we've always had, your humor, and speaking of humor, your dry martinis and your dry sense of humor just go so well together.
I want to thank Ben for introducing me and planting the seed in the 1990s to get involved with the Sonoma County Economic Development Board and the county in general. It provided an opportunity to stretch my business acumen, and we're all better because of it. I certainly am, and I know that the county is better as a result of Ben's efforts.
But I think today, in the last 5 years, you know, the accolades have finally come your way that were well deserved, because you've had your hand in so many of the successful programs of this county, and the county's been blessed to have you in that role. They're going to miss you. Hopefully I'm not going to miss you, because hopefully I'll be able to spend more time having lunch with you and talking about politics and economics and issues. So congratulations. Thank you.
In his words, Ben, onward and upward. Congratulations. Thank you.
I also want to invite Pam Chanter up. Who's Pam? Just want to make sure we have Pam up here as well. Pam Chanter is the current chair of the Economic Development Board. Thank you, Pam. Ben? a small token of our appreciation for all the work that you've done and the imprint that you've left on Sonoma County. You will be missed, and we look forward to continuing as we go forward, having you around and your expertise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how they did this because we have a pretty small office and I think I always know what's going on, but I guess I don't. So thank you very much. It's up to you. It's been a team effort. You guys have all come forward and then thousands of other people. So I'm just very inspired. And yes, I will continue to be around here and volunteer and help out wherever I can. So thank you. I'm just overcome. Thank you very much. Thanks. Now back to work. Thank you, David Rabbit, for a very inspiring presentation. Brought back a lot of awareness of how much has happened and all the good things that are going on here. Now, I'd like to take time to introduce Dr. Jerry Nicholsberg, who is the director of the UCLA Anderson Forecast. The Anderson Forecast is the most widely followed in the state and has been unique in accurately predicting many of our state's economic fluctuations. And little known fact, I just found out that Jerry is a native of Santa Rosa, spent the first 2 years of his life here. So go Jerry. But then he went on to the University of Minnesota where he got his PhD, has been on the faculty of UCLA for the past 12 years and happily lives in Malibu. He has presented at past State of the County conferences before. We're very pleased to have Jerry back today. So let's give him a great Sonoma County welcome.
Thank you, Ben. So I've known Ben for, I guess, about 10 years. And Ben, you've been an inspiration to us all. Congratulations on your retirement. And look forward to spending a lot of time with you while you're retired, although I'm not. We're putting up pictures here with people with hair that has color in it. I don't know. So David charged me with giving you the Powerball numbers, and I'm up to the challenge. You will find them embedded in the presentation. It's your responsibility to figure out where they are. So, and yes, I spent the first couple of years of my life in Santa Rosa. It was great. All I had to do was eat, burp, and sleep. Okay, so what I want to talk about is up here, growth and regeneration. The last time we were together a year ago, I presented some research on how communities around the country and around the world recovered from disaster. And Sonoma has really been kind of at the forefront of the recovery process in the light of what other communities have done. So this time I want to just kind of take a look at what's happening here and kind of what the consequences are, but in the context of the U.S. economy and the California economy, because that's all important for what happens here in Sonoma County. So I'm going to begin and end with the county. So that's the soaring Sonoma economy, U.S. outlook, the California outlook, and look at some various sectors in California, and then and some risks, and then follow that with the Sonoma County forecast. So the risks today in our economy are very much elevated. And I'm going to present a forecast, but what I'd like you to keep in mind is there's not a lot of upside risk in this forecast, and there's a lot of downside risk. And those are the things that we're going to have to keep our eyes on as we move forward in making our business and policy decisions. So let's jump right in with some retrospective of what's happening here in Sonoma County. So this is the unemployment rate, and the unemployment rate, the latest numbers here are 2.6%. And as you look across here, you see the last time it was this low was during the dot-com boom. So the unemployment is really historically low. so we can just get rid of the unemployment there. And what we have are firms that are hiring. And I remember Ben asking how many people are trying to hire, and a room full of hands went up. And so there are a couple of ways that you can hire when you have full employment. You can have in-migration, you can draw from the local area, or you can have churn, and I want to talk about each of those. So what you see here is unemployment rates in the Bay Area. And going from left to right, Sonoma's in green, you get all the way over, including the East Bay, except for the last two, which are Solano and Napa, under 3% unemployment. And Napa and Solano are under 4% unemployment. So drawing from the region, well, the entire region is really constrained in terms of tight labor markets. So that's not really going to help very much in terms of growth. The last time we were here, we were looking at this growth and saying, well, full employment constrains growth. And if you look at, so this is employment, if you look at the upward movement and then kind of look over on the right, you see a big flat spot. And so our conclusion was that the full employment in the area was really going to constrain growth in jobs. Our conclusion was wrong, unlike those Powerball numbers, which, have you found any yet? And so we're at record employment here in the county. Okay, so how does that happen if the region is characterized by tight labor markets? Well, one way it happens is by longer commutes. So the two arrows there are, the red bar is job growth in the U.S., the green is Sonoma, and the two blue with the arrows pointing to them are Silicon Valley and San Francisco, all growing faster than the U.S. One of the ways that it happens is long-distance commuting. So if you look all the way over on the left-hand side, you see Sacramento and the Delta. You get long-distance commuting into the western part of the Bay and the North Bay. And so we're seeing some of that. That's one of the ways that it happens. So full employment will constrain economic growth unless you can have these kinds of changes. So nationally, that certainly happens, particularly with restrictive immigration policies. But locally, you can draw people in from long distance. You can also have kind of a churn and a change in who is living in the county and what their propensity for working in the marketplace is. But housing is a big constraint, as you know. And what you see here is the FHFA home price index for Sonoma County, and it is way above the previous peak. And so what is happening there? What's happening is the demand for housing, even before the destruction of homes in the horrific fires, exceeded the supply. And you knew that, and you were trying to build more houses. The fires took away, about 6,000 homes. And so that exacerbated the problem. But what it did was it sped a churn with people who can earn high incomes, who can telecommute, coming in and demanding the housing to demand the Sonoma lifestyle, and people with lower incomes migrating out. And we've seen articles in the newspaper about this, about people leaving Sonoma because they feel they can't afford to be here anymore. So there are real policy decisions here about how the community changes. It's not unique to Sonoma. The loss of the housing that y'all experienced, certainly is somewhat unique in the state of California. But we see the same processes happening in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, in the western part of Los Angeles County. So this is a process that's going on throughout the state, and requires thought and some policy decisions as to what you all want the county to look like going forward. And we heard David talk about some of that and some of the things that you're doing, but that's going to be an ongoing process. But Ben spoke about the increase in housing. What I did was I looked at permits in the 9 months before the Tubbs fire, and in the same 9 months of this year, and there's a net increase of 1,765 permits. So that is really moving fast. And we talked last year about speed was essential in recovery. If you look at recoveries from wildfires throughout the West, this is phenomenal. You all have really stepped up. You don't see this kind of progress elsewhere. But of course, as Ben and David said, there's a lot more to go. But certainly the start is really quite impressive. It turned from a beautiful Sonoma scenery to black. Must be we're talking about the U.S. economy. It's not all that dark. We had employment numbers today that were actually quite good. So there looks to be basic strength in the U.S. economy, but as I said, there are real risks, and here's one of the major risks. So I've written up here on the top line is private savings plus public savings. So public savings is taxes minus government expenditure. And we know that that's negative. We have a big budget deficit. But private and public savings are what's left over to fund investment and to fund net foreign investment. So domestic and net foreign investment. And what we know is the government savings are going down, right? So the budget deficit, because of the change in the tax law, has really kind of exploded. So, and this is just an accounting identity. I'm stepping away from economics and pretending to be an accountant for the moment. So this equality has to hold. So one thing that can happen is that we can all save more. And so let me take a poll here. How many of you have decided, because the government budget federal deficit has increased, that you're going to save more? Anybody? Bueller? Yeah, me either. Okay, so that doesn't work. We could have domestic investment go down. So what happens when how does this happen? Well, the government goes out and borrows, which it must. It bids funds away from private investors by bidding up the interest rate. But the whole purpose of the tax cut was to increase investment, not reduce it. And if you reduce investment, now we're looking at a recession scenario. So that doesn't work. So that means that we've got to borrow it from foreigners. And where do foreigners get the money? Well, I mean, we're not going to borrow yen or Korean won or Chinese renminbi. We have to borrow dollars, which means they have to sell us more than they buy from us. And then they have these excess dollars and they lend it back to us. But government policy today is to reduce the trade deficit, not increase it. It doesn't work. You can't have all increased investment, reduced trade deficit, decrease government savings, unless you guys change your mind and want to save more, right? That's the big risk. We have inconsistent national economic policy that could well lead us into an economy that's quite different from the forecasts that you're going to see. As forecasters, we have to resolve this, and I'll tell you how we're going to resolve it. So there's the government deficits, and they go up to $1 trillion and kind of stay there. And everyone's estimate of this is about the same. I mean, the idea that these tax cuts were going to pay for themselves was really fantasy. But all of the estimates of these deficits assume no recession. So we have $1 trillion deficits, no recession. We get a recession, it becomes $2 trillion. And that equation that has to hold still has to hold, but now with borrowings in the $2 trillion range. Okay? So that's the downside risk. So how do we resolve the inconsistency in government policy? The way that we do it is we say, well, there's going to be a lot of noise about trade agreements, and they're going to be the best trade agreements ever. And they're going to do nothing. And that is the case with the agreement with South Korea, is the case with the NAFTA 2.0, which is not called NAFTA, except in the document it's called NAFTA. So let me leave you something to wonder about. The agreement with Mexico was negotiated with the government of Peña Nieto, and Peña Nieto was on his way out and kind of not very popular. And so that was the agreement. The guy coming in, AMLO, he's no bud of Peña Nieto, to be sure. And have you heard Mexico complain about what a lousy deal they got or anything? Anybody heard Mexico complain about this deal? There's a good reason. It's a great deal for Mexico. But it's, of course, the best trade agreement ever, right? It doesn't change very much, except that it increases Mexico's exports to the U.S. And kind of everyone in Mexico knows, don't say anything. We think the same thing's going to happen with China. That we need to be borrowing more from foreigners to fund that deficit, that there's going to be a meeting between our president and Xi Jinping. They're going to have a wonderful agreement, and it's not really going to change much of anything. If we're wrong, this is the downside risk. So it's something to keep your eyes on. Okay, so we've had a massive stimulus imposed upon a full employment economy. It drives down the national unemployment rate. I know it just went up last month by a tick to 4%, but it's going to drive it down mid threes. Then it starts coming back up because that's not sustainable. But what we have seen is we're now seeing wage growth. And so we've got demand growth from the federal government, wage growth in labor markets. That means inflation, and inflation above 2%. The Fed's target is 2%. The Fed has two charges. One is full employment. They've got that. The other is price stability. And so what we have, in spite of what Chairman Powell is saying, is we have interest rates going up through this year. Because what did Chairman Powell say? He says, well, you know, we have to look at the data. And right now it's a little uncertain with the government shutdown. So we'll wait a bit. But to maintain price stability, if the Fed takes this charge seriously, which I think they do, you have to have higher interest rates. And so we have interest rates going up. But as the economy weakens, as we go into 2020, those interest rates flatten out and indeed come down a bit. The increase in interest rates is going to cool off the housing market. We're already seeing this nationwide in places where you would expect housing markets not to be cooling off, such as Atlanta and Dallas and Houston. So that's going to continue. Also in auto markets, this is defense spending, real defense spending. We have a growth in that in the last budget, but that growth is not going to continue, so that stimulus goes away. This is certainly beneficial for California, but it's not something that's a continuing stimulus. And so that means that what we've had with this tax cut and massive increase in government spending is we've got a sugar high that has pushed our economy to a 3% economy. The fundamentals that gave us a 2% economy in this recovery are still there, and they are low growth in the labor slow growth in the labor force, fairly tepid investment, and in spite of the tax cut, investment is still pretty tepid, and a kind of a flat spot in productivity growth, and that's all still there. So how do we get to the 3%? Part of what brought us to the 3% economy in 2018 was tax incentives that moved investment from 2019 and 2020 back into 2018, which means that this year and next year, those investments won't be there. And that gives us an economy that's 3% last year. We're looking at a 2% economy this year, and it continuing to decline. And in the latter half of 2020, we have a sub 1% economy. Doesn't take much with a trajectory like that to push you down much further to a no growth economy or even less. Okay, so we've got the sugar high, and of course, after a sugar high, we get the sugar crash. it's not that this part wasn't known. If you recall, before the midterm elections, the Republicans were talking about another tax cut to keep the sugar going. That didn't happen. It's not going to happen. So head down on the computer is sort of where we're going. Okay, so now turning to California and the way in which we do our the way in which we do our forecast is we start with the U.S., then we go to California, and then we go to regions in California, because each one's embedded one in another, you know, kind of like the Russian dolls that are one inside the other. So we ask the question, what's different about California? One of the things is we lean to the left. I love this picture. Another is the high cost of housing. This one is in Los Angeles. It's $125 million. I don't know what you do with this house. I looked at this. I counted the number of Chase lounges around the pool. There are 14 of them. I mean, do you just rotate, you know, one a day for 2 weeks? But this is California. But what we want to look at is trade and tourism, which is important here. Home construction, higher interest rates, the vulnerability of the state government and the state government's budget to the next downturn, and then we'll turn to the forecast. So let's begin just with some employment numbers. In California, as in Sonoma, we're at record employment levels. The top line is the total number of people employed, including those who are self-employed and farm workers, and we're 16+% above the previous trough. The bottom line is payroll jobs, and we're over 20% above the previous trough. So very similar statewide as to what's happened here in Sonoma County. If we turn to trade, we've had a lot of trade tensions. What's the impact on our logistics industry? On the lower left, you see the seaports, and that's imports into our seaports. The top one are the Southern California ports, the huge ports, and then the bottom two lines in that chart are the Bay Area ports and the Puget Sound. All of them have an upward trend. You can't see a trade dispute in this. Right? And this is consistent with our view that even though there's a lot of noise about trade deficits, not much is happening. And in fact, we have record trade deficits now this year, or this last year. On the top is exports, and exports are flat. Exports could well turn down with a softening of foreign economies, and we're kind of seeing that. And of course, the trade wars have an impact here in Sonoma County on exports of agricultural goods. But so far, we don't see any impact in the aggregate. There are impacts in particular sectors and particular businesses, but in the aggregate, we don't see any impact of the trade disputes as yet. Now, turning to homes, home prices have been increasing, and this is now this is the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, and the index is for the three lines are San Francisco, San Jose, and Los Angeles. Those are the three metropolitan areas that are surveyed in the Case-Shiller Index. They're all normalized to 100% at the peak in 2007. So this is all relative to 2007, and you see that San Francisco is 30% above the peak. Los Angeles is lagging behind and only 10 or 11% above the peak. But if you look on the right-hand side, you see that this kind of flattens out, right? And this is the soft housing markets that we've been hearing about statewide and nationwide. And you see that also in sales. If, again, you look over the right-hand side, you get a little tailing off of home sales. But this is not as severe as what you see in other parts of the country. What's happening here is with higher interest rates, buyers can buy less. So the demand has kind of shrunk. And home sellers now have to figure out what is the new price they can sell their home at. But they don't want to drop the price too fast. So there's a price discovery going on. So this is exactly what we expect to happen when mortgage interest rates go up. But the demand for homes in California is so strong, just like the demand for homes here in Sonoma County, that our forecast, unlike the U.S., is for increases in home building throughout our forecast period here in California. And we expect to see that. and expect to get back to about where we were in 2000. But we have to keep in mind that this is increasing our annual home production to about 138,000 homes. And statewide, there's been a loss over the last 2 years through wildfires of 30,000 homes. We need about 200,000 per year to keep up with population growth. And we're growing our home production, but we're still kind of way behind, even with a fairly dramatic increase to about 140,000. Okay, so the last thing that I want to cover and fairly quickly is, are we prepared statewide for the next recession? And so this line, the blue line, is personal income taxes paid into state government, and that's the principal thing that funds the general fund, that provides grants to communities throughout the state and also provides public services. And the red line is the trend, and sometimes we're below and sometimes we're above. And if you look over on the right-hand side, you see that we're above, in a good bit above. And when we get to a recession, we go from that above trend to below trend. And so what we did was an experiment to say, well, what would happen if we had a recession? So the first thing that we did was what we call a garden variety recession. We never have garden variety recessions in California, but maybe. And so we asked, what's going to be the change in revenue at the statewide level? And the answer is that it's going to be about 18 billion each of 2 years. And so the total impact about $36 billion. Sounds like a lot, but remember in the last recession, the $46 billion shortfall. So this is 10 billion better, but it's a big number, right? And then the second thing that we asked was, well, what about a really mild recession? So this is kind of dreaming that we'll have a mild recession in California. And the answer is we get a 31 billion. Why is there not a huge difference between these two? It's because of the nature of our tax system, that we fund the tax system, that we fund state government on the profits and capital gains of the highest income earners. And in a recession, high income earners don't do IPOs. Their bonuses shrink, entrepreneurial profits shrink, and so on. And mild or severe, there's not a lot of difference there. So we're looking at $30-some billion shortfall over a 2-year period in state revenues. So how prepared are we? Well, we've got about $15 billion put away. So that's about half of it. The other thing that's been happening in state government is a pay down of debt. So we probably have maybe $10-15 billion of debt capability. And if you add that up, you get to somewhere around 30 billion. So yes, we're going to have a turn down in state revenues, but we're much better prepared than we were the last 2 times. And so that's good news, when this next recession does happen upon us. And the further that is in the future, so the larger the rainy day fund will be and the better prepared we'll be. But remember, we've got these elevated risks kind of hanging over us and the downside risk to the forecast. So let me finish up with the California forecast. It pretty much follows the U.S. We get slowing employment growth, ending up with 0.9% next year, still faster than the U.S., but slowing because of the full employment and the constraints on the labor market. We have the unemployment rate at about 4.5% statewide, on the coast, as we just saw, below 3%, and still remaining at or near full employment. Personal income after inflation, quite good, and that's because of the kinds of things that we produce here in California. That we're going to have personal income growth that's really going to outpace the U.S., and then increases in home production throughout the state. And finally, for Sonoma County, we have growth in real income still, really quite high at 3 to 4.5%. Part of that is due to tight labor markets, resulting in higher wages. Part of it is due to this migration that I spoke about earlier of highly skilled people coming into the county, and they earn higher income. So it's a mix of those two. But we have slow, about 0.5% growth in employment. All of these things that constrain employment growth are still going to be there. In fact, through the balance of this expansion, we expect them to get a bit worse. Recession risk still exists, and the recession risk increases sort of as time goes on. So we have these elevated risks. It does not look like we're going to have a recession in the coming 6 months, but the risks keep building as we keep getting more and more imbalances in the economy. And then finally, what you all know well, housing is a constraint, and more housing eases that constraint. So that concludes the presentation. And how many of you now know the Powerball numbers? A couple of them. So you have to share that with me, David. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kind of a mixed message, but there's some good things coming up all the same. I've been asked to clarify in terms of Sonoma State building the 1,500 homes in the University District. That is in partnership. The city of Rohnert Park and their developer have made that University District possible, and now Sonoma State can come in and build the houses. So thank you again for a marvelous event. Thank you for being so supportive of the Economic Development Board through the years. Go out and make it a great day. Thank you.